Hello everyone, welcome back to the Math 0332 Notes. I'm Mr. Lee, and we're checking in now. We've done between fractions and decimals and percents and decimals, so naturally we need to be able to convert between percents and fractions, which is the bulk of the fourth homework assignment. And you have a few options here. You can convert your percents to decimals and then use your strategies to convert decimals to fractions, or you can set things up kind of as a ratio and then reduce from there. I think that that's usually somewhat easier, but let's see. So write the following percents as fractions or mixed numbers and make sure to reduce. So what percentage really is parts out of 100. But that can get somewhat tricky. So let's see how we deal with this. 90% is really 90 out of 100. Because every percent is part of 100. From here, you would just reduce. They both have 10 in common, so you divide by 10 on both to get 9/10. Now, most of you already know that 9 out of 10 is a 90%, but this is really the idea here. If you set every percent as a part over 100, you get to just reduce. There's one exception, is that if your percent has a decimal, and we'll see what happens there. 35% is 35 out of 100. These both are multiples of 5, so you divide by 5 to get 7 out of 20. 335% really works the same. If you were to have, say, 335 out of 100, say both of these are multiples of 5, you get, it looks like, what? 335 divided by 5 should be 67. 100 divided by 5 is 20. Now this is an improper fraction. If they want you to do it as a mixed number, figure out how many times 20 goes into 67. 20 into 67, 3 times. That gives 60, subtract it. You get 7 as a remainder. So this is really 3 and 7/20ths if you're doing it as a mixed number. I don't know if the homework has you do it as a mixed number or an improper fraction. I will accept either one, and if the homework ever counts it wrong on a quiz, I can always go back in and give good credit for that. The ones that are actually tricky are ones like D, 8.25%. Because if I write it as 8.25 over 100, this doesn't help me because it has a decimal, which means from there, what I'm going to have to do is move the decimal 2 places to the right to get this to be 825. But in order to do that, I effectively multiplied this by 100 to get it to move to the right too. I also would have to multiply this by 100, which adds 2 zeros. So a general rule of thumb is that if you're going to do that movement for the decimal, you have to add a number of zeros or move the decimal place in the denominator. Since this denominator will always be 100, it will be about adding zeros. And from here, it's kind of tough sledding. These are actually both multiples of 25. Now 825 divided by 25, this goes in 3 times, subtract 75, get 7, bring down the 5, 25 into 75, also 3 times, that's 0. That should, if it's going to reduce by a number, you should get a remainder of 0 at some point. So this becomes 33 in the numerator. 10,000 divided by 25, you can also do like this. 25 into 100, 4 times, subtract 100, get 0. If you have extra zeros when it ends, you just keep adding those zeros up to the top as well. So this ends up being 33 out of 400. 8.25% is actually our, I believe, state tax rate. Basically what that means is for every $400 of goods, you pay an extra $33 worth of tax. And this is really how you do percents to fractions, but what about if you go the other way? If you're going the other way from a fraction back to a percent, sometimes it makes it best set up if you set it up as a proportion. Whatever fraction you've got is equal to some unknown number divided by 100. The reason we do this is that all percentages are a number divided by 100, part of 100%. So that means you're only finding that x value from there to see what it would be equal to. Now, if it's already over 100, this is pretty easy. 13 over 100 is equal to x out of 100. If you cross multiply, you get 13 times 100 is equal to x times 100, or 1300 equals 100x. It's somewhat redundant to do it this way, but then you can divide it by 100 to get that x is 13. Generally speaking, if you have a fraction already over 100, that numerator is going to be its percent. So if x is 13, this is really 13%. Now, how does this work with something like 1/4? 1/4 is equal to x over 100. When you cross multiply here, you'll have 1 times 100 equals 4 times x. Or 100 equals 4x. And then when you divide by 4, you get that x is 25. That's because 25 out of 100 is equal to 1/4. But more importantly, that means 1/4 as a percent is 25%. 1/8 is a little bit trickier, but works the same as 1/4. 1/8 equals x over 100. When you cross multiply, instead of 100 equals 4x, you now have 100 equals 8x. And from here, when you divide by 8, that actually doesn't fully reduce. X equals 100 over 8. I would suggest doing your division. How many times does 8 go into 100? 8 goes into 10 once. Subtract the 8. Get 2, bring down the 0. 8 goes into 20 twice. You're not done yet. Subtract 16, you get 4. We add a 0 here to bring down the 0. 8 actually goes into 40 5 times to finish it off. So that 5 goes here, but since we had an extra decimal that we added, one of our numbers has to be behind a decimal. So you actually get that x here is 12.5, which means 1/8 is actually 12.5%. This also can be done with repeating decimals. Like we talked about, 9s and 11s might repeat. So let's look at how this works. 5 over 9 equals x over 100. When you cross multiply, you get 500 equals 9x. So you divide by 9. You get x equals 500 over 9. And again, this is going to require division. 9 into 500. Let's add 2 decimals just to make a point. 9 goes into 50 5 times. Subtract 45 to get 5. Bring down the 0. It's 9 into 50 again. 5 times. Subtract 45. Get 5. Bring down the 0. 9 into 50. At this point, you might see a pattern. So it just ends up repeating over and over. 55.55555. The way we end up doing this, though, is one of the ways that we can do this is write it as 55.55 repeating percent. Or what we can do is stop at the 100 mark, which was here, where we got the 55, and call it 55 and 5/9, because that was a remainder over what we divided by, 55 and 5/9%. These mean the same thing, and I'm okay with either one. I think your homework actually does the mixed number as a percent and not a repeating decimal, which I think will be a little bit easier. So what are your options? You'll either have straight up decimals, potentially ones with, or straight up percentages with decimals in them, or potentially percentages that are written as mixed numbers, but they could be the equivalent of repeating decimals. And that's really all there is in this conversion between fraction and percentage homework. It's definitely a little bit harder than decimals and percentages, but it's not too bad overall. And we'll look at percent equations in the final video over Unit 4.